wanted to start with you. You've worked with Jeb and Charlie in the past. Did you write this story with these two actors in mind? And how did those prior relationships help you shape this narrative and inspire this film?
Yes, the answer is yes, very much so. As Charlie and I were just talking about before this call, a huge inspiration for me, honestly, was just getting to see Charlie be a father with a beard and have him talk about X, Y, and Z. That really was a certain inspiration just from the jump. Of course, other things too of just wanting to try to get to make another film together. And similar with Jeb, just knowing, how he talks and the way he walks and certain things that I've either gotten to see him do before and love, or I haven't and knew he could do. So it sort of is like some strange combination of all those things, also, having spent a lot of time with Charlie talking about either scripts that he's reading at the time or things he might do or going to films together and talking about what we liked or didn't like. There's a certain excitement in, getting to write a character, knowing that this friend of yours is going to play it. And, and in some ways, maybe writing certain moments and scenes where, where you can't picture how they're going to do it. But that it'll be exciting to do it together in some sort of way. And that's also the magic of why I step back and let these guys, do the thing that they do. So yeah, it's a definite advantage to get to write with people's voices in mind, and certainly the way they walk in mind, since we got a good amount of walking in this film.
Great answer. Charlie, what was it about Jeff's script and Nate in particular that resonated with you?
I mean, I think the whole script resonated with me. But Jeff, as a filmmaker, I had known him for a couple of years before he gave me the script. And I think, like he just said, it was almost really like those years of conversations leading up to the script that informed me then reading it. And then once I read it, I just completely fell in love with what it was exploring, and specifically this kind of disconnected masculine, dynamic that ultimately is between these two people that love each other deeply, but don't know how to express it, don't know how to express anything around it. And that's always something that's interesting to me. People's, them trying to express their feelings and the lack sometimes of being able to do so. But yeah, I think for Nate specifically, I was just drawn to the way he spoke in the script. And like Jeff mentioned at the beginning too, the fact that he was a young dad, and I hadn't gotten that experience before in terms of playing a character that was a parent and having that responsibility. I've played, older siblings and caretakers and stuff like that, but I think it's very different to have that kind of responsibility on your shoulders at such a young age. And that was something that was also really compelling to me and interesting. So yeah, it had a lot going for it, but most of all, I think it was the people involved, Jeff being first and foremost.
And Jeff, this film does such a beautiful job of exploring these serious subject matters with a bit of humor. How are you able to tread that line so masterfully?
Well, thank you. I think honestly, a lot of it is related to even what we just talked about too, kind of, knowing these guys and their voices pretty well. I think Jeb is genuinely a really hilarious person. And so he kind of, I feel like there's this thing maybe sometimes with like a comedic actor like him that I can write a line and know if Jeb says it, it will play in a way that at least could be funny. And I think that's a lot of what we were doing was trying to avoid maybe, too many punchlines, but knowing that certain things could be funny. And so similarly with Charlie, that I knew that, and through conversations with Charlie, a lot of the way that he was going to play the character, was going to be, I think the thing I said to them probably over and over again was like, just be earnest, like just be this way. And certain lines and moments will offer some humor. We don't have to really push for it. So I think you know, maybe Charlie would agree. Like, I think that honestly, repeating those kind of words over and over again was what really led to the humor. And, you know, I think of like one of the scenes I think is really funny in the film is when they're talking about Nate's car, and none of that was you know, there's nothing around like try to be funny here, but Charlie's character really thinks his car is impressive.
Yeah.
So if he just really believes it and says it, there might be some people that think it's funny. So I think really a lot of it was actually not trying to play to it all that much, because we knew that like the story was heavy enough in terms of its subject that if we could, try to offer a little bit of lightness, you know, we would probably be a big benefit for us.
Definitely. And then Charlie, when we're introduced to your character, he's dealing with so much in his life and you handle that journey with so much nuance. And as you were saying earlier, this is a role unlike any that you've done before. As an actor, how did you create the space for yourself to dive into that emotional mindset of Nate and where he is in life?
Oh, thank you so much for saying that, man. I mean, I honestly, for me, it's so much about the immediate space and the people in that. And we were so lucky that we had such a close group of people. So, you know, what Jeff was just saying, the moments that were really just, you know, genuinely two guys trying to connect for the first time could just be that. And then sometimes when things got a bit more intense and the emotional side of the scene could get a little bit more loaded, you know, I felt like I was just really protected, and everybody in the space, you know, from our sound guy Zach, you know, to our DP, to really all the producers, everybody that had any role in this film, you know, everyone was just so close and felt that sense of safety. And I was just talking to an actor that I'm going to do this other project with about the importance of rehearsal and why it's important. And really, it's just about building trust, and that you can't fake that. And so I think with this, we got especially lucky that I kind of just walked onto this environment, onto this set, and that trust is just there because all these people have had years of experience of knowing each other, and I've known some of them for a couple of years as well. So it just felt like it was there, and then it got to just kind of open up to be, you know, what it is in the film. But I think there was music, you know, there was writing that Jeff and I spoke about leading up to it, a lot of Raymond Carver, you know, things that were kind of provided clues and a look into maybe who this guy was, but there wasn't a lot of like finger pointing and going like, oh, this is exactly what we're trying to do, or this is who this guy is. You know, it was kind of this like slow process of just unfolding who these people were as we went through the shoot.
Answer. And Jeff, this is also your first feature film. Did anything surprise you about this overall experience? What was the biggest lesson that you learned that you've not been able to apply to future projects?
That's a good question. I think that honestly, like at least I remember my initial instinct coming out of the film and as we were getting close to finishing it was that not a ton of it actually felt that different than making a short. It just felt genuinely much bigger. Like really just in a very straightforward way, the size feels more significant. I mean, I think in some ways too, that might not be everybody's experience. I got to make this a lot like I made my short films. You know, I was lucky to add a couple extra people to the crew. But it really was made, like Charlie said, you know, vast majority of the crew were friends of mine already. And Charlie had worked on short films of mine or other films he'd made in Oregon with some of the crew. So there was just sort of a cohesion that I think in some way, Charlie used the phrasing of like, I was really protected. I feel the same way about myself, that because everyone was friends to some degree or another, and we made it, our approach was not to make it feel like, hey, here's Jeff's first film. Let's make sure it really feels like it. And let's put a lot of circumstance around it. You know, I think I was protected in that we just had a few extra days. We had a longer script. And we were still focused on the same things we were focused on when we made shorts together. So, you know, I think honestly, a lot of the learning process has been in the last 6 months. You know, it's like really showing it in like bigger theaters and at bigger festivals, and you know, just having more reaction to it. Which obviously at the end of the day, that's the idea, right? Is to make something and have a lot of people be able to see it and a lot of people react to it. But yeah, I would say that the biggest learning curve is around actually, you know, doing what we're doing now, you know, really, and less of, you know, the cozy part, and the part that I love is getting to, you know, be in the desert with my friends and you know, have good actors say lines I wrote, you know. So that part felt relatively familiar, but you know, hopefully get to do it again. And I think you asked like what does it mean for projects going forward? I think it's just that, you know, if I'm lucky to get to be put in a similar position, trying to protect this sort of feeling, you know, and like knowing that maybe more money would be involved, and maybe there's some people with opinions that are not completely my own, but you know, trying to protect some sense of what is it like to be with just 10 friends out in the woods, and kind of nobody even knows you're making a movie. That's a good feeling.
Great answer. And then Charlie, for you, you've worked on projects of all sizes. What is it about independent filmmaking that excites you as a creative? And is the experience different when the person who's created this world is also at the helm directing?
I mean, to answer the second part of your question, I think when someone's a writer director as opposed to just being a director, I think it just gives a little bit more. I mean, in my experience, at least, I would say that the person is just a lot more flexible in the moment, and generally, I would say is more confident in making changes at the last second. You know, there is one less rung of communication to have to make sure that something can shift. And in a working experience, I think that can be a real asset at times, because when you don't have a lot of time and you're just working in a spur of the moment kind of feeling, and you know, if you want to just move in one direction, it's nice to only have one person that you got to look to and go, hey, can I jump in that direction? And they just give you a nod. But I think it depends on the person totally. And I think for indie film in general, I think, you know, for me, I was lucky that my first real substantial experience on a film was on an indie film. I actually was working with a guy who had also graduated NYU, and this was when I was 15, and most of that crew, similar to this, actually were all college friends and had worked on each other's projects for years. And so I think that being my very first experience just kind of set the bar, and the template from there was just, you know, that guerrilla style, like we're gonna go until the very end and give it everything we've got. And I think Jeff just put it really wisely. That feeling of nobody knows you're making a movie is infectious, and when it feels like you're kind of just running away from life a little bit, and when, you know, you're so aware of the movie you're making all the time, and you're constantly going into a big dressing room or you're in front of green screens and stuff like that, and you're constantly aware of it, you know, I think you lose that feeling over time. And so whenever you're in that environment where all you have is the group of people that you're with, and you don't know where you're going, and it all just feels really fast, I think that, you know, I've just learned, for me, that's what gets the best work out of myself. You know, that's how I push myself the most, and that's also just how I have the most fun and feel like I can actually grow with the character in real time. But it's different for everybody. I mean, I commend the actors that know how to just come in and crush it, no matter what the situation is, no matter who's involved. But for me, it's so much about the experience and the people involved, and making sure that the priorities are on the work, you know. So yeah, I think that's when indie film lends itself to that kind of experience more than anything.